Hello, my dear. How are you today? Are you good? If you're ready for today's lesson, let's start. Today we will start our lesson with new words. Let's start. Cloth, cloth, ink, ink, wrapping, wrapping, fan, fan, fireworks, fireworks, cocoon, cocoon, flame, flame, paper. Let's read the text about paper. The Chinese invented paper about 2000 years ago. They made it from different plants. At first, they used it for wrapping things, then they used it for writing and drawing on. This picture shows leaves and flowers. Paper was most useful for books. For hundreds of years, people wrote books. They used pens and ink, and it took a long time. Then, one of the most important inventions appeared. Now, at first, the Chinese used paper. At first, the Chinese used paper for writing, wrapping, and drawing. It is definitely wrapping because here is written, yes? Wrapping things. At first, they used it for wrapping things. Paper was most useful for writing, reading, and books. Definitely books because here is written, yes? Good job. Let's continue. Printing. China's people first printed on clothes more than 2000 years ago. They cut a pattern on a block of wood. They put dye on the wood block, then they pressed the block onto the cloth. The block printed the pattern. They could use the block again and again. Sometimes the cloth was silk. The Chinese invented silk too. This piece of silk is a beautiful curtain. Later, the Chinese printed words on paper. They cut words on the wood block. This was difficult work. They put ink on the block, then they pressed the paper onto it. The wood block printed the words onto the paper. The printers printed one page at a time, but they could print with the block many times. They could make many copies of each book. More people could have books. The oldest printed book in the world is from China. It's more than 1100 years old. Now, let's do the reading with you. Chinese people sometimes, always, often printed on silk cloths. It is definitely Chinese people first printed on cloths more than 2000. They cut a pattern on block onto the cloth. The block printed it. They could use the block again. hmm Sometimes, yes, because here is written. Sometimes the cloth was silk. Later, the Chinese printed words on books, blocks, and paper. Later, the Chinese printed on paper. Yes, that's why paper. They could make many copies of each block, book, or page. They could make many copies of each book. That's why it is book. Yes, good job. Now, let's turn to the next activity. In this activity, we have to read the definitions and write the correct word. The thread round the silkworm. Fan, fireworks, cocoon, cocoon, flame, ink. It is definitely cocoon. The bright part of a fire, flame. Lights and fire exploding in the sky. Fireworks. Dark liquid you can write with. Ink. Something you can move around to cool your face. It is fan. Now, my dear, in the next activity, we will read the small text and we will do the listening with you. The Chinese invented paper about 2000 years ago. More than 500 years ago, the Egyptians invented something very like paper. They called it papyrus. They made it from papyrus reeds. These tall reeds grow next to the river Nile in Egypt. My dear, let's look and listen, then we will put the actions in the order, okay? Now let's start.
Book, Unit 9, page 96. Activities 2 and 3.
First, the men went to the river. They cut the tall papyrus reeds with sharp knives. Next, they cut the reeds into short pieces. Outside of the reeds, the green part, was very hard, so they cut this off. Inside of the reeds was soft and white. They cut this into long, thin pieces. Took the long, thin pieces and placed them in a box. They placed the pieces side by side, first top to bottom and then across. Next, they covered the papyrus with a piece of cloth. Then they placed heavy stones on the cloth. The stones pressed down on the papyrus. There was sticky juice inside the papyrus, and the stones pushed this juice out. Soon all the long, thin pieces were sticking together. After a few days, the papyrus was dry. They took it out of the box and used it for writing and drawing. Go to Egypt, you will see papyrus. Perhaps you will buy a papyrus picture.
Okay, my dear, now we did this activity with you, yes? If you pay attention, I will say it. First one, C. Second, E. Third, H. Fourth, A. Fifth, G. Sixth, B. Seventh, D. And eighth, F, yes? Now, my dear, let's pay attention to the phonics of today's lesson. I, G, H letters make I sound. I. For example, a long time ago, sailors used the stars at night. I. Yes? A long time ago, sailors used the stars at night. Lights in the sky, fireworks fly high, exploding in the night, brighter than starlight. Now let's read the chant again. Lights in the sky, fireworks fly high, exploding in the night, brighter than starlight. My dear, it was the last page that we have to learn with you. Now it is time to finish the lesson. That's why I have to say goodbye to you. See you next lesson.